quite mean, really, isn't it? Getting us all really drunk last night and making us get up early in the morning and give presentations or sit there. So the year was 1984, and my dad brought home cassette tapes of Bob Marley, and I became a Bob Marley fan. In 1993, I was living as an exchange student in Germany, and I bought the CDs of Bob Marley's entire anthology. And 2000s, I was ripping those onto my iPod, and then the other morning I came out, and we have an Apple Mac in the kitchen, and there's a Bob Marley music video playing, and on YouTube, full screen Bob Marley music video over the internet, and there was nobody in the room, and I was wondering, that was, my 6-year-old daughter had queued that up and got that running. And it was really at that point that I realized that our demand for bandwidth is really completely insatiable, and it also allows you to sort of peg me somewhere in the progressive technology as to what technology I've grown up with. The same cassette recorder that we were playing Bob Marley on, I was loading computer programs up on my first computer. So the ZX Spectrum computer was powered by cassette tape. So thinking about this concept of entrepreneurship, I guess I divided into people who see do not enter signs and do not enter, and people who see do not enter signs and wonder, why would they have put that on there? Is that dangerous? Is there any it's probably just some bureaucrat that's done that. So I'm just going to go and have a look. So pretty early on, I was starting to explore my entrepreneurial tendencies. So I was a node in the very early internet, trading online games. We didn't have advertising in the games we were trading by floppy disk, but we did discover a way to reduce the price of international connectivity. So in a standard envelope, you can fit 8 floppy disks, about 1.5 megabytes each. So you could 8 times 1.5 megabytes. I can't work that out, but anyway. So I would be sending these off to Europe, and they would be sending me back disks with new software on it, and I'd take that software to school and I would trade that around. Now, stamps to Europe were obviously quite expensive for sending Europes like this, and so discovered the trick of being able to put glue stick over the stamps. Then the stamp would be postmarked, and then your European friends would send them back to you, and then you would use warm water to wash them off, and then you would re-stick it on. Free internet. On most Kiwi streets, you will find one of these telephone connectors, and if you take the top of it off with a screwdriver or a hacksaw, you will find that there are pairs of wires in there that if you connect to them with alligator clips and a phone and a modem, you can connect also to free internet. We had a card phone at school, and with that card phone we discovered a bug in it, which was that you could call the 018 service and say, hello, I'd like the number for Domino's Pizza down the road, please. And they would give you the number, and you'd say, thank you very much. And then they would hang up, and you would be given a dial tone. And that was a free calling line. There's a bug in the early firmware of the phones. And because you were standing in the school lobby, it was difficult to attach a modem and to get free internet. And what was actually more profitable was to find my Indian and Polynesian friends and give them the opportunity to call their families at much reduced rates. So as I reached the age at which one goes to jail for such exploits, I decided I needed to do something else. And so we started the Trade Me business, and I learned a lot doing the Trade Me business like Claudia. I feel that that was my early MBA. I turned 30 and decided that, well, I don't want to do that for another 10 years. That was really hard, so I'll do something else. And I also resolved to not be known as the Trade Me guy when I pass off the mortal coil. So I hope to have a four-legged stool story that I can tell later in life, where I can tell about multiple adventures. People still think I run Trade Me, which is great, so I'm still getting the benefit of actually not running it, even though I'm not running it. So Trade Me taught me about extremely high growth ventures and how to deal with all the different aspects of that from a technology perspective through to managing people and culture. Taught me about the importance of culture and organization. Increasingly, as we're making less and less widgets and selling less and less kind of raw materials, the importance of talent and culture is just becoming more and more and more known to me as the key driver of growth. I learned about trust. The whole premise of Trade Me is that you send money to people you've never met for goods that you've never seen. And the fact that this works at all was a bit of a, no one. At the time I was working at Deloitte, and I was telling my friends, hey, come and, we're gonna start this company, I'll give you like 20% of it, just like quit your job and come and do some coding. I go, no, that's not gonna work, man. I still have those friends. But it told me about the importance of trust. And I think one of the things that that we underestimate in New Zealand is the importance of trust. There is no Trade Me in Libya. There is no Trade Me in the Baltics. There is no Trade Me in East Africa. There is no Trade Me in Russia of any size. Trust is an extraordinarily important part of what we have as a competitive advantage as New Zealanders. And the ability, I'm an investor in a big dairy farm in Brazil, as you do. And we were talking to an institutional investor for that earlier in the week. And they were saying, look, we really want to get exposure to international assets. But it's a bit of a minefield out there in terms of, dealing in Brazil, which is very bureaucratic. In China, we have various other issues. And they said, what we really want is exposure to the asset class through Kiwis, because we trust Kiwis and we understand them. And the Kiwis that aren't trustworthy, not in entirety, but the ones that take money off mums and dads and don't give it back and so forth, are forced to leave the country. So we actually have a self-reinforcing trust mechanism and network in New Zealand. I also learned about usability. Now, we were, all my geeky friends and I were using Winamp to play MP3s at parties. We didn't do a lot of dancing, but we were, MP3s were nothing new. And the iPod really showed how you can completely unleash demand with usability. If you can make it easy enough for your mother and your grandmother to use, then your market size is massively larger. And that was one of the things that I was particularly good at Trade Me, I think, was that basically I have the ability to think like a middle-aged woman who's never used a computer and sit there and navigate around a web product and work out how normal people think about using computers. So basically, if you make the internet faster, people use more of it. It's logical to think that you would have a finite amount of stuff to do, and then if the internet was faster, you would get through the stuff you need to do faster, and then you would spend less time on the internet. It's the complete opposite. You have a finite amount of frustration that you can tolerate before you move off the internet. If it's extremely fast, then you will be on it all day long, and you'll be using extremely high-resolution video, and you'll be doing things with it you just don't even realize you can do with it now. We have, just a modern television in our lounge. You can hook up a computer to that and you can do full screen video to the rest of the world now. The only thing that's constraining, my kids dancing in front of my parents who are in Central America on Skype is the usability, really. So we understand this about internet consumption and how if you make it faster, people will use more of it. And companies like Xero, which I'm involved with on the board, are taking advantage of that. As the usability and the speed come on board, then people, we are not going to be installing software on our computers 20 years from now. I'm not doing it now, really, but most of us will not be doing it 20 years from now. So everything is going to be hosted. And where's it going to be hosted? It's not going to be hosted down at TY Point necessarily because of the cheap energy that we potentially do by kicking out an aluminium plant. It's probably going to be hosted in the US. And so all of our digital life is going to be, except Trade Me, which will probably remain here because it's a domestic audience only, will be in the US. So our connectivity to there is extraordinarily important. I'm also a director of Fairfax Media, so we're trying to work out how to deal with the fact that you've really got a legacy business increasingly in the newspaper game who's trying to work out what this new world looks like. So I'm getting to enjoy the ride on both sides. So Pacific Fibre came about when, the idea for Pacific Fibre came about when we were sitting around with David Cunliffe, Rod Drury, a friend of mine who runs Xero, sitting around and we were saying, this fibre to the home thing is kind of great. I mean, all that's going to do is make people go faster to Trade Me, which we appreciate, but it's not actually going to solve the problem that you really need to solve. You haven't really thought about the problem well enough. Here's what you need to do. And he said, well, look, why don't, you guys are smart guys, a bit of money, and, should really be a private sector thing, and maybe you guys should do it. And we went, oh, fuck it, we will then. So the way that this manifests in New Zealand is through data caps. So fibre to the home will allow you to get through your data cap before you can drink your cup of tea, is what that does. It makes it extraordinarily fast to pull stuff down, but the economics are in the international data and the way that they constrain that. But basically the way that ISPs work at the moment is they try and get as many of you as possible onto their $50 a month plans or what have you, and to buy as little international bandwidth as they can to stop you from leaving. That's the dynamic. And when enough of every 250th phone call they get, so you should call, complaining about how slow it is, they'll buy a little bit more. I mean, that's basically how it works. We're in a world of scarcity. So at the moment, we're doing a lot of talk about connectivity, how important it is for us to connect with global networks, for people like Claudia to want to move back to New Zealand to live here, or to work here, or to work with us. And we say, look, please don't send us 5 megabyte attachments. We can't deal with that, really. We all know about the importance of connectivity for New Zealand in the world. It removes the tyranny of distance, allows us to do weightless exports, all of those important things we know. We don't really know exactly what the things are that will be creating value, but we know that it's the things that are forecastable, milk solids, we know what that will do, and there's a mysterious bit which we know will have a heavy influence with technology. We're currently connected to the world entirely, from a digital perspective, by one cable provider. So it's a market problem. It's not a performance problem. The cable's great. But if you owned a big cable, how would you price it? I know how I'd do it. So at the moment, we pay for a 10 gigabit wavelength, which is kind of a technical view of connectivity. It's a big piece of pipe, if you think about it that way. We pay $16 million or so, US dollars, per 10 gigabit connection, and the equivalent in somewhere like Japan is, with lots of cables, would be $400,000. So basically we're going to do a red line like that, up to the US. Importantly, from Australia, where most of the demand comes from, the market in Australia is not too different, actually, in terms of pricing or the constraint. It's not that hard, kind of looks like this. It's pretty small, it's just literally a hose pipe, lays across the bottom of the ocean. So, it's technically not that difficult. It's kind of like the amazing technology you get in your computer. You go into the Apple Store, you kind of buy one. There are people who do this a lot. If you have enough money, if you have $400 million, you just phone them up and say, I'd like one, please, and they do it. It's not that hard. So so let's just talk a little bit about what's driving the demand. So the demand, the number of broadband subscribers is going up at a certain rate. That's great. Bandwidth has actually inflected up. So I sold TradeMe in 2006, and interestingly, we built that business on a narrowband world. We knew that eBay was slow because we had poor international links, that they were hosted in the US. Microsoft, Yahoo, eBay, it's all hosted in the US. And so the big competitive advantage we had was that if we built this to be really snappy in New Zealand, that would give us enough of an edge. That only has to be 20% better for you to win in that market. And so we built it for a narrowband world, and TradeMe has always been a very fast site because that was at the core of the philosophy. But what has inflected up all that bandwidth? So 90% of all of our content comes from offshore. We've talked about that. Up here you see the total 100%, what is consuming the traffic. At the bottom you have HTTP, which is basically web traffic, the red stuff, it's tailing off. And you find video exploding. YouTube's about 10%. At peak time in the US at the moment, there's about, Netflix have a service in the US, basically all the video content you can eat. Apologise to people who have been overseas recently and know this, but if you live in New Zealand, you might not. $7.99 a month, all the video content that you can eat on a broadband link, with a cable into the back of your TV. $7.99 a month for all the video content you can eat. Those servers are also in the US. In peak time, that's taking up about 20% of all of the bandwidth on the internet in the US at the moment. My daughters will not know video stores, and they will not know CDs, and they will not know DVDs when they're my age. Facebook's another, social networking and all these other things, another sort of 17%. You sort of see what's driving all this traffic. Skype, built into your television. You can buy TVs now, you just put them on the wall, plug your internet in the back, or they're wireless connected. They've got a video camera up the top, sign in, phone your friends, and you've got a 50-inch video conferencing. It's all there now. All of the applications are pushing into the cloud, Office and so forth pushing into the cloud. All of Google's services. I've got a few companies, and we just run everything on Google. We don't have any servers or anything. It's all in the cloud. Xero's all in the cloud. iPads, new devices into the home. So this is my first computer was the ZX Spectrum. My daughter's first computer is the iPad. She is growing up in it. They're both growing up. My two daughters are growing up in a very different world to what we know, and it's going extraordinarily fast. This stuff in terms of how fast the technology is moving. My Skybox has the ability to be internet connected. Obviously, if you own the content in New Zealand and you're $150 a month for video content, then you're not really that motivated to make sure it kind of is $7.99 a month, right? But you can connect that to the internet if you hack it. PlayStation comes internet connected, so you can play all your games with your mates online. You can get Netflix through your Xbox or your PlayStation. Videos, music, all of that stuff, all your books, everything. It's all digital if you want to live that way. And increasingly we will, because the economics will be too challenging for a WIT calls. I mean, whether or not people want to read books is completely irrelevant. Whether or not there's a business in selling books is what's relevant. 5 years ago, none of us had really smartphones. I used to have Vodafone guys visit me every year and say, hey, it's about to take off at TradeMe. Why don't you build an app? And I was like, yeah, well, when people start using it, then maybe we'll do something. But if you give us a couple of $100,000, we'll build one. And they would every couple of years, which is great. But this has actually become a reality now. So we've all got the internet in our pocket. As you'd expect, you hop in a taxi in Auckland and the guy doesn't know where he's going. So, I'm sitting there with my maps on my phone showing him how to drive. You can have high-speed video. I just noticed, where's the cameraman actually? I just saw him sitting in front of me before. Everyone just look at the guy at the back with their camera. Keep looking. No, just kidding. So he has a camera around his neck. When I sold Trade Me, one of my shareholders went out and he said, you know what, I'm going to start a video rental, a digital film camera rental business, because cameras, the film stock and everything, it's 300 grand, and it should all be digital, and it can all be digital. And so he went and bought a bunch of 150, 200 grand cameras that do full frame, HD video, looks just as good as film, and was renting them out to people. Within 2 years, that had moved to, that device that is around that man's neck does the same thing. It's 5 grand. He can do full screen, movie quality, advertising quality video on a Canon. That's the speed with which this is moving. And the amount of data that takes compared to, a lower format is kind of 10x. It just goes up. This is a air-mounted one where you can walk around all day with a, HD video. And George was actually talking to me about this last night. He's going to do this all day next week with his video camera around his grapes. And then he can upload the whole thing to YouTube for his fans. Now, the elephant in the room, obviously, with internet, is porn. Apparently, this town has their sign stolen every few days. And most boys in the UK have one of them now, and which is quite funny. We see this sort of cynicism about what the internet can be used for. Oh, it's only going to be used for video. It's only going to be used for more porn. What's the point of just enabling faster porn? It's kind of like not inventing cars in case of drive-by shootings. So we kind of don't really know where this is going, but we know that there's an extraordinary amount of wealth being created in this space. The Google market cap versus 100-year-old rights for drilling for oil and creating a BP. Market caps that are similar. YouTube going from 0 to 750 million or whatever valuation in 2 years. Claudia's business, all these other businesses that we're creating. We can create tremendous wealth. And it doesn't take too many people, like the world-class New Zealand kind of people, to be reinvesting in New Zealand and doing things for us to get a real flywheel effect. So, and actually, people need porn as well. So this is what we're doing in New Zealand. The dates are a little, but we basically have a narrowband world. It's not that narrow. It's actually pretty good. But we have copper to the home, so DSL technology to the home. We've got national backhaul, and then we've got the international connectivity. What we're going to do is create a massive pipe into your house. We call it the fibre to the Auckland. Unless we solve this international capacity issue, it's going to not do anything. Last year, the Southern Cross Cable guys had $200 million of dividends. We're talking about a $400 million cable, $200 million of dividends. It doesn't take much for us to, the business case for this thing has to stack up. We have to make money for our investors, but it's not, you don't have to be too clever to work out you've got to, how to do it. You've just got to be able to raise $400 million. So I guess the message I want to leave you with is really about the importance of connectivity to our markets, and the importance of talent, and the importance to our future of this sort of digital connectivity. I don't think it's acceptable for us, 25 years from now, to still be connected to the world by a single monopoly provider. I don't think that's a healthy position for New Zealand to have. And so, summing up, I'd just like to just thank everyone for their encouragement and support for the project. So Stephen has been an early supporter, is at our board meetings, is deeply involved, and there's a bunch of us who are really deeply committed to this project, and we think that we can have a good business. It's not, it doesn't have internet economics. It's not going to make anyone extraordinarily rich, but we can make money out of it, which is important to make money for our investors, and we'll be able to do that. And hopefully we can enable whatever is the future for young New Zealanders with, cameras hanging around their necks to create our wealth. Thanks.